Do you possess these 7 Stoic qualities? How many of these 7 high-value traits do you have? As you reflect on these signs, ask yourself, how many do I possess? What can I do to nurture and develop them further? Remember, the journey to becoming a high-value person doesn't happen overnight. It is a path marked by persistence, courage, and an unyielding commitment to personal growth and ethical living. Let's delve deeper into the cornerstone of every high-value person: self-awareness. This isn't merely about knowing your likes or dislikes, nor is it just an understanding of your routine strengths and weaknesses. Self-awareness is about profound insights into your core principles, your emotional triggers, and the purpose that drives every action you take. It's about aligning your daily life with your deepest values. Now consider the inspiring story of Oprah Winfrey, born into poverty. Faced with immense challenges and heartbreaks from a young age, Oprah could have allowed her past to dictate her future. Instead, she used her experiences to fuel her journey towards self-awareness. Through constant self-evaluation, Oprah not only recognized her potential as a communicator, but also understood the power of her voice in making a meaningful impact. In the face of criticism and numerous setbacks, Oprah stayed true to her vision, anchoring her actions in her discovered purpose. Her self-awareness allowed her to navigate through life's storms, not merely to survive, but to thrive and help others do the same. Today, she stands as a beacon of strength, empowerment, and transformative success. Like Oprah, each of us can tap into our self-awareness to propel us forward. It requires that we ask ourselves tough questions, reflect deeply, and listen earnestly to the answers that come from within. When was the last time you really listened to your inner self? When have you last adjusted your path based on deep personal insights? The journey of self-awareness is ongoing and ever-evolving. It demands courage to face ourselves, resilience to accept what we find, and wisdom to change what doesn't align with our deepest values. The magic happens in the moments of quiet reflection where we truly meet ourselves. This brings us to the next point: resilience, a virtue that truly encapsulates the essence of Stoic philosophy. Resilience isn't just recovering from a fall. It's about using that fall as a stepping stone to rise higher than you were before. It's about transforming adversity into advantage and hardship into hope. Consider the incredible journey of Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. Amidst the unimaginable horrors of the concentration camps, Frankl discovered a profound truth. Those who survived were not necessarily the physically strongest, but those who retained a purpose in life. He saw that the human spirit could be stripped of everything but one thing: the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Frankl chose purpose and meaning despite suffering, and he emerged not just surviving, but thriving. He went on to write Man's Search for Meaning, a book that has inspired millions to find significance in the very act of living, regardless of circumstance. Like Frankl, we all face moments that test our resilience. You might be facing personal trials, professional setbacks, or health challenges. But remember, resilience means seeing beyond the moment of pain, looking towards the horizon where possibilities lie. It's about asking yourself, what can this experience teach me, rather than why is this happening to me? Resilience is built through small daily acts of persevering and moving forward. It's about setting your eyes on a goal and adjusting your path as needed without ever losing sight of that goal. It's about maintaining your inner calm and stoic resolve amidst the storm. Now, imagine your life as a tapestry of experiences. Each thread of challenge is intertwined with resilience, creating a stronger and more vibrant picture. Each time you choose to stand up after a fall, you are weaving resilience into your life's tapestry. This brings us to the next point: empathy. Empathy is more than just a word. It's a bridge that connects us to the hearts of others. It's the fuel that powers understanding and the glue that binds us in our shared human experience. Stoics teach us that to live a life of virtue, we must cultivate empathy. For it is empathy that allows us to truly step outside our own experiences and into the shoes of another. Let's talk about Dr. Samantha Lee, A pediatrician renowned not just for her medical expertise, but for the depth of her empathy. She works in one of the busiest hospitals in the city, where every day she encounters young patients from all walks of life, facing health challenges that would test the resolve of any spirit, young or old. But Dr. Lee does something extraordinary. With every child she treats, she takes a moment to connect, to really understand what they and their families are going through. She listens to their fears, acknowledges their struggles, and reassures them with a warmth that goes beyond medical care. It's her empathy that leaves a lasting impact on these families. Parents and children alike don't just see her as a doctor, but as a pillar of support and a beacon of hope in their most challenging times. Dr. Lee's ability to empathize doesn't just change lives, it saves them. She can sense when a child's quiet demeanor is a cry for help, or when a parent's anxious smile is masking a deep uncertainty. She acts not just as a healer of the body, but as a healer of the heart. And isn't that what being a high-value person is all about? It's about more than just living your life. It's about enriching the lives of others. The empathy Dr. Lee shows isn't an extraordinary act. It is a testament to what each of us is capable of. Each of us has this immense power to not just connect, but to profoundly impact lives through our empathy. Now let's consider integrity. Integrity is non-negotiable. It stands as the cornerstone of a life well lived and a character well built. To embody integrity is to live in alignment with your deepest values, not just when eyes are on you, but especially when they are not. It's about being the same person on the outside that you are on the inside, regardless of the pressure or temptations you may face. This is how integrity builds trust, and it is trust that builds lasting influence. Let me tell you about Rosa Parks, an emblem of integrity and courage. In 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa made a decision that would not only change her life, but alter the course of history. By refusing to give up her seat in a segregated bus, she demonstrated immense integrity. It wasn't the easy choice. It was the right choice. Her action wasn't based on convenience or compliance, but on a steadfast commitment to justice and equality. Rosa Parks stood true to her values despite the potential personal cost. Her integrity earned her the trust and respect of millions and became a pivotal influence in the civil rights movement. Imagine the impact of living like Rosa Parks. Imagine how the steadfast nature of integrity can influence and inspire those around you. When you choose to stand by your principles even in the face of adversity, you not only affirm your own value, but also light the way for others. You become a beacon of reliability and honor. Now, think about your own life. Consider the moments when you are faced with choices that test your integrity. These are your opportunities to demonstrate true character. Each time you choose integrity, you reinforce the foundation of trust and respect in your relationships. You increase your influence in the world, not through manipulation or coercion, but through the powerful force of genuine character. Let us shift gears now and discuss about simplicity. In a world constantly chasing for more, high-value individuals find power in simplicity. They understand that true power and true wealth comes not from accumulating, but from appreciating. Not from possessing a multitude of things, but from experiencing a multitude of moments. Let's delve deeper into this idea of simplicity. Simplicity is about focusing on what truly matters. Eliminating the unnecessary doesn't just mean decluttering your physical space. It means decluttering your mind, your commitments, and your relationships. It's about stripping away the superfluous to reveal the essential. Now, consider the story of John, a successful corporate lawyer who seemed to have it all. From the outside, his life was a portrait of success, a high-paying job, a luxury apartment, a flashy car. But on the inside, John felt nothing but exhaustion and emptiness. He was constantly chasing deadlines, deals, and approvals, yet he found little joy in his achievements. It was only after a serious health scare that John paused to reevaluate his life's trajectory. Motivated by the principles of Stoic simplicity, John made a bold decision. He traded his high-stress job for a less demanding one in a non-profit. He moved from his upscale but sterile apartment to a smaller home closer to nature. He swapped his luxury car for a bicycle and local transport. These changes might seem radical, but they were his way of eliminating the unnecessary. The result? A life that once felt heavy now felt light. A schedule that was once crammed with meetings now offered space for reflection, for family, for walks in the park. John discovered that in simplicity there is clarity, and in clarity there is contentment. And so I ask you, what might you find if you dare to simplify? What joy, what forgotten passions, what deep connections with others might emerge when you remove the layers of the non-essential that you've built around your life? Imagine the freedom of living with less to prove, less to hide, and less to lose. This is not about diminishing your life, but enhancing it, enriching it with the quality of your experiences rather than the quantity of your possessions. As we continue, let's look at purposefulness. Let us truly understand what it means to live not by chance, but by choice. Every action of a high-value person is driven by purpose. They don't live life by accident. Every decision and every interaction is intentional and aimed at making a positive contribution. Now, consider the inspiring story of Thomas, a man who embodied purposefulness in every aspect of his life. Thomas was a teacher in a small community where resources were scarce and many students came from challenging backgrounds. But Thomas saw beyond the limitations of his environment. He saw potential in every student and believed that with the right guidance, each one could flourish. Every morning, Thomas arrived early at school to prepare lessons that were not just educational, but inspirational. He integrated life skills, moral values, and critical thinking into his teachings. His purpose? Not just to educate, but to empower. Thomas lived his daily life with the conviction that if he could ignite a spark of curiosity and confidence in his students, they would strive for more than they believed possible. His impact was profound. Students who were once disinterested in education became leaders in the classroom. They participated, questioned, and excelled. Thomas helped them apply for colleges, secure scholarships, and even start their own community projects. His purposeful actions created a ripple effect that transformed not just individual lives, but the entire community. Thomas's life teaches us a powerful lesson in purposefulness. He shows us that when we align our actions with our values and commit to making a positive impact, the extent of our influence can go beyond what we see. Each of us has the power to lead a purpose-driven life, to make every action count. Let this story be a call to action for each of you. Ask yourself, how can I bring purpose into my everyday actions? How can I live deliberately in a way that not only achieves my goals, but also contributes positively to those around me? Turning to our final point, courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The courage to stand up for what is right, to speak when others are silent, to act when it is easier not to. Let me tell you the story of Amir, a young journalist in a region where freedom of speech is not just suppressed, it's punished. Amir knew the dangers of reporting the truth in an environment where media is heavily censored. Every article he wrote put him at risk, yet he continued to write. Why? Because he believed that the power of truth is the ultimate catalyst for change. Amir's courage was not born out of recklessness, but from a profound commitment to justice. When a local crisis was being swept under the rug, he was the one who exposed it, bringing international attention and aid to thousands in need. His actions demonstrate what it means to be courageous. It's the resolve to act in alignment with your principles, no matter the consequences. Imagine if Amir had let fear dictate his actions. The untold stories, the injustices hidden from the world, and the change that never would have come. Courage, like Amir's, demands that we face our fears and choose to act despite them. This is the essence of courage in the life of a high-value person. It is the essence that calls us to rise above the ordinary, to speak out against wrongdoing, and to defend the truth even if our voice shakes. Because when you stand up for what is right, when you speak when others are silent, and when you act when it is easier not to, you are not just living, you are leading. You too have that same power within you. There lies within each of us a wellspring of courage ready to be unleashed. It's there in the moments when you see something wrong and decide it's your time to act. Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the close of our time together, I want to leave you with a thought that I hope will carry you forward from this moment. You are in control of the person you wish to become. Every step you take and every decision you make shapes not just your destiny, but also the legacy you leave behind. Do not be discouraged by the setbacks, nor be swayed by fleeting successes. True growth comes from a commitment to your principles and a steadfast belief in your ability to make a difference. Every day offers a new opportunity to reflect on who you are and who you want to be. So as you step out from here today, step out with resolve. Step out with purpose. Embrace the challenges as opportunities to demonstrate your value and to strengthen your character. Forge your path with the wisdom of Stoicism, knowing that each obstacle you overcome is a testament to your resilience and a step towards greatness. Let's not just aim to be high-value individuals. Let's strive to uplift and inspire those we encounter along our journey. Together as a community of the committed, we can turn the ideals of Stoicism into actions that resonate throughout our lives and ripple out into the world. Thank you for your commitment to taking this journey with me. Together we will not only pursue greatness, we will achieve it. Let's go forth with courage and with the unshakable conviction that we are building a better world one virtuous step at a time. Thank you, and let us begin. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up by hitting the like button below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content like this, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Thanks for being a part of our Modern Stoic Minds community.